Hello, and welcome back to This Month on the Railroad, my monthly video series covering North American train news. Today's episode will be covering the month of April 2023, which as usual was full of interesting news. Let's begin. On April 1st, Norfolk Southern SD70 ACE number 1067, the Reading Heritage Unit, was released from the Juniata shops in Altoona, Pennsylvania, following a mid-life overhaul. Among other things, 1067 received a fresh coat of paint. Since their debut over 10 years ago, Norfolk Southern's 20 heritage units have begun to show their age, with their former vibrant colors often being muted by dirt and in some cases partially chipped off. Luckily, 1067's fresh new look could be a sign that the entire heritage fleet is due for a much-needed facelift. 2 days later, on the 3rd, the first of the MBTA's new Hyundai Rotem bi-level cars entered service. Though they're nearly identical to older Rotem cars, the 80 new cars on order will allow the T to finally begin to retire its ancient single-level cars, which at this point it's been talking about doing for years. On the same day, Amtrak's Adirondack returned to Montreal for the first time in over 3 years, making it the final route to return from the infamous cutbacks of 2020. I guess if you've ever wondered how long it takes Amtrak to recover from a pandemic, 3 years is your answer. The next day, Cleveland's RTA, one of the weirdest metro systems in the country, placed an order for 24 Siemens S200 light rail vehicles. These cars are intended to replace the 80s era heavy rail cars seen on the Red Line, meaning that the Cleveland Metro will switch from half light rail and half heavy rail equipment to fully light rail. Cleveland's Metro is one of the least used rapid transit systems in the country, so it's a pretty rare occasion to see new equipment being ordered. On the same day, the Indiana Railroad began the process of replacing its most iconic locomotives, the SD90 Max. On the morning of April 14th, an XNS SD70M was spotted wearing the iconic red and white paint of the Indiana Railroad. Over the next year or so, a total of 10 SD70Ms are expected to fully replace the railroad's remaining SD90s, which are weirdly only a few years older than their replacements. On the 5th, a report came out stating that the Northern Lights Express, a proposed passenger service between Minneapolis and Duluth, Minnesota, is the closest it's ever come to being funded, with state funding expected to be decided in late May. If funding is approved, this estimated $450 million project will restore passenger service between these cities for the first time since the 1980s. More than a week later, on the 14th, Canadian Pacific Kansas City, or CPKC, which by the way is a terrible name for a railroad, officially began operations, now with a 20,000-mile network across Canada, the US, and Mexico. While no official paint scheme has been confirmed yet, most rail yards across the system, and any other place where a logo would be shown, were switched from CP or KCS to CPKC. As I said last episode, CPKC is bound to be in the news quite a bit, as any newly incorporated railroad is bound to be. On the 17th, full service returned on the Surfline between Los Angeles and San Diego after an 8-month closure of the line. Last September, high tides in San Clemente caused track washouts, and finally, after 8 months of railbed stabilization and other work, services returned between LA and San Diego, one of the busiest rail corridors in the country. The next day, the New York Susquehanna and Western Railroad released its first ever heritage unit depicting its 1940s-era silver and maroon paint scheme. Being that the NYSW is one of the oldest continuously operating railroads in the country, it's had its fair share of paint schemes, but this unit wears one of its most iconic ones. On April 20th, Florida's TriRail revealed a new paint scheme, or more accurately, wrap design for its cars. Last month, I wrongly reported that the runner-up paint scheme was the winner, but this darker blue paint scheme is the actual final design. Staying in Florida, on the same day, Brightline revealed its new station at Orlando International Airport. In typical Brightline fashion, Orlando Station is a clean, modern, and welcoming station which will see passengers beginning this summer. Along with official station photos, Brightline released a preliminary schedule with hourly trains in each direction between Orlando and Miami. Brightline expects that a non-stop trip from Orlando to Miami will take just under 3 hours, while trips making all stops between the cities will take 3 hours and 30 minutes. The next day, the government of Montreal announced that the long-awaited REM light rail will finally open this summer after years of delays. This $7 billion automated train system will completely change Montreal's transit, providing quick, convenient, and modern train service across the city. The REM will quite possibly be the most modern train system in North America, with futuristic automated trains and modern electrified lines. On the 24th, the Nevada Department of Transportation announced that it was interested in partially funding Brightline West a high-speed rail project between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. Brightline hopes that the Nevada DOT, in addition to the federal government, will provide much-needed funding to build this 260-mile high-speed rail system. Interestingly, in this press release, a new rendering of a Brightline West train was released, this time with a train similar to Amtrak's Avelia Liberty. While some think this could be a sign that the previous equipment deal with Siemens Mobility fell through, it may just be some random concept art. I guess we'll find out what happens in the near future. Speaking of brand new trains, on the 25th, Quebec City announced a deal with Alstom to manufacture 34 Citadis light rail vehicles for the 12-mile light rail system planned to open in 2029. Like Montreal's REM trains, these will be some of the most modern-looking pieces of rail equipment in North America. On the 27th, California became the first state to pass diesel emission rules for trains, creating a law to go into effect in 2030. Starting then, locomotive prime movers older than 23 years old, so built in 2007 or earlier, will be outlawed, which they hope will incentivize railroads to focus on lower-emission diesel locomotives and even zero-emissions equipment. In addition to the 23-year rule, all locomotives will be required to be equipped with auto stop-start and won't be allowed to idle for more than 30 minutes at a time. This law, in conjunction with state grants to railroads for lower emissions equipment, will make California the leader in zero emissions and low emissions railroad equipment. Finally, on the 28th, Amtrak debuted its biggest ad wrap campaign to date. Turning 4 ACS-64s into rolling billboards, Amtrak promoted a Broadway version of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. All 4 units, 634, 638, 641, and 653, currently wear identical wraps, all of which made their debuts from late April into early May. Like the previous King Tut ad campaign, the design isn't my favorite, but nonetheless, it's always nice to see Amtrak locomotives in different colors. So that's April, and with that we're on to May, which means it's almost summer. As I did last year, I'm going to try to upload weekly, or at least every other week. I know the past few months I've only been able to make This Month on the Railroad, but very soon I'll be back with some different content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.